My name is Patrick Hussey, uh, fifth generation Washingtonian. I'm a volunteer at the History Museum. I also am an APS volunteer up at the Reserve. It's my really good friend Lee James. Lived here since what, 1862, something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe a year earlier.
year earlier.
Yeah.
So very knowledgeable. And the lovely Morgan White here is the administrator at the museum. So we're going to spend about an hour as planned, and I'll make a few introductory remarks about the cemetery, and then we're going to walk off this way, and we're going to walk through focusing on some of the Civil War monuments that are here, and then we're going to weave in the, as mentioned in the flyer, we're going to weave in a lot of the sea captains that ended up settling here, and we're doing that because at the museum, opening in
June 6th.
June 6th, is an incredible wing on the maritime history of this area. They've been working on it for months, and it's just amazing what they put together. So, Sunnyside Cemetery. It's called Sunnyside Cemetery because the parents of Isaac Eby, who was as the first Euro-American settler out here, 1 square mile, 640 acres, he came out first, and his parents were back in the Midwest in Missouri, Jacob and Sarah, and he wrote them and persuaded them, you've got to come out here. And so Jacob was 60, 61, veteran of the Black Hawk War, the War of 1812. Sarah was 59 years old. They came across the Oregon Trail. They were like 3 times the age of the average person that came across the Oregon Trail. They also came out with Isaac's other siblings, Winfield, Mary, and Sarah. And they stayed with Isaac and Rebecca down there for a while they looked for a donation land act claim. By the time they made a claim, they were limited to 320 acres. So they made this claim up here on the top of the overlooking Isaac, overlooking the prairie, 320 acres. The house is still there, the Jacob and Sarah Eby house. It's open on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think it's open today from 11 to 4. But they called their farm Sunnyside Farm. And so when the last Eby that was here was Mary, the eldest sister, Mary Eby Bozart, and when her brother Winfield passed away, TB, at a very early age, she decided, I don't want to bury him down there with the folks and everybody else. People buried themselves in the farm. They were down at the farm, all buried down there. And Mary decided, I want to have a proper burial ground for my family. So she created what we call the Eby graveyard. It's the oldest part of the cemetery. It's about an acre down that corner. And she carved that out of the farm. And Winfield, her younger brother, was the first one that was buried down there. So that's why it's called the Sunnyside Cemetery, and it gradually expanded, over the years to what it is today. It's one of the oldest territorial cemeteries in the Pacific Northwest. It has a lot of unique features to it, which we're going to comment on. But I'll let Lee go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a great introduction and overview to what we have here. The main part of the cemetery that he's referring to is right over there. We'll be going by it, and we'll refer to a couple of the grave sites in that area. The thing that I would like to share with you is some of the thoughts that I've been going through about this tour. We've been doing a heritage tour for many years now. Roger Sherman gets a lot of credit for that. And it's occurred to me and some others that we would like to blend in with the spirit of the holiday a little bit better than we have in the past. You know, we've talked all around the history and everything. The part that we really haven't emphasized, to my knowledge, is the service aspect of this community over time. Who were these people who were buried here? What did they experience? What do we want to remember about them today? And especially in terms of the service aspect. Now there's kind of a reality here that makes what we're doing under construction. And that's that all these little flags and things that have to do with people who served but did not necessarily die in the line of service. That difference is important because today is memorial. Think about people perhaps being electrified, so to speak, for their service. That did not happen very much around here. To go back in history very far, they did not ship bodies over oceans and over, the expanse of the United States and so on. Even right around here in terms of conflict, we're very limited on the deaths. Hardly any. So that means that really we're talking about people who put themselves in harm's way. How did they do that? And we're going to specialize today quite a bit in the sea captain part and related things like ship's pilots, lighthouse keepers, and that sort of thing that potentially could have put them in harm's way. And we do have one or two examples of that, a lighthouse keeper's son, which Patrick will talk about. But again, we're mostly talking about very kind of interesting and illustrious pioneers and all who very easily could have died in the course of what they were doing but didn't. And we're happy that they lived to hang up their uniform or whatever that they were wearing. So just wanted to give you that overview, and we appreciate any comments you might have about that whole subject, about what kind of tour we should have today on Memorial Day. As you go along, if you think of something.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to walk over to this area over here and pause for just a second right now. So the Native Americans that were in this area were the lower Skagit of the Coast Salish, and their culture and tradition, they did not bury people in the ground. They discovered they would do various things, including hoisting them up in small structures into trees and then setting them afloat. But as the settlers came in and the more natives passed away, they started to be buried up here. There's a lot of, along this hedgerow, all the way down, Native Americans were buried there. They put up little wooden stakes to identify them, but back in the day they would clean the cemetery out by burning the grass. So all those wooden markers are gone, but you can still walk down that area and you can kind of see the indentations. This is a very historic headstone right here. Some of you know about the Kettles. Alex and Susie Kettle are buried here. Susie was a lower Skagit, married to Alex from Duwamish, but they lived in Coupeville for many years. They were beloved by the community. Alex lived to about 94 years old. The town appreciated them so much that at the town park there in Coupeville, across from the park, there's a very nice house. That was the house that the community of Coupeville built for them, so they'd have their own residence. It's owned by some friends of mine who live there now and did a lot of work on it, restoring it. That was the Kettle house. The other thing I want to mention is this cemetery has what's called sextons that are in charge of it. So the Sherman family goes way back in terms of being sextons. Will Sherman came out from Iowa, so farmer. He came out here in 1892. Will Sherman he was a farmer. He started taking care of the cemetery. When he passed, it went to his son Edwin Sherman. Part of the Sherman family farms right out there. Still, they're very generous in terms of donating land to enhance the cemetery. So Edwin became the sexton. From Edwin, it went to his son Dale. Some of you know about Dale Sherman. It went to Dale Sherman. And Dale, several years ago, passed the torch to his older brother, Vin Sherman. So Vin is the sexton here. And, you know, he runs the place. I mean, he's got great staff. There's a gentleman by the name of Steve Deacon who works here and knows so much about the cemetery. And they take care of it in such a good way. So, Lee, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, maybe we're going to be heading this way. So why don't you wind right through? And his sons came out here in the late 1890s and discovered Coopville through Everett, is where they actually found out about Coopville, and came out here and been here ever since. 1, 2, 3. Okay. This is a classic Civil War monument. What happened after the Civil War was there was a lot of people who died in combat, obviously. There were a lot of remains to take care of. And unfortunately, they weren't always cared for all that well. They weren't marked all that well, or the monuments were kept up. So Decoration Day was started to make up for that. So that was the beginning of our holiday today. Memorial Day really was an aftermath of the Civil War and properly recognizing and taking care of the memory of the people who died in the war. Well, the states oftentimes took the lead on that effort. And that is really shown in this cemetery because there are 2 more monuments just like this one from Wisconsin right in this area. And to me, it just says that, well, Wisconsin was kind of on it, or maybe there was some individual here who helped make that happen in some special way that right now we don't know about. What we do know is a lot of history on William Lee buried here. William Lee I'll characterize as an everyman. There was nothing remarkable about him. He was not raised a warrior. He was a farmer's son who enlisted in the Union Army right at the beginning of the Civil War. Now, they were Canadian, so I don't know if that had anything to do with enlistment or not, because so often refugees serve in our army, but that's what happened here. Well, he served twice in the Civil War. He re-enlisted midstream, survived the war, mostly because he didn't get involved in anything much other than wagon trains, supply trains, and that sort of thing. He and his son went west, hunted buffalo in the Black Hills. Well, that could make you think about Native Americans being in the Black Hills, okay? Well, maybe that part was kind of up there too, but what we do know is that in the course of hunting buffalo, they shot a bull in kind of a ravine type situation, and when he went to skin the bull revived, threw him in the air, he broke his leg in 2 places. Another buffalo skinner set him up so that he could recover after about a year, and then he came out here. He spent a lot of time in Oregon, Washington, and Alaska, Sitka, Alaska. And at the time of his death, he was in poor health. He was mostly centered on Ording, Washington, the old folks' home. But somehow he got here where he died, and nobody knows why he was here. So that's the way the stories go a lot of times, you know. It's just odd things, and it's not like we have necessarily decorated soldiers who died in combat, but it could happen to any of us. You know, it makes you think about how how these are people just like us, and you never know what your future is going to hold.
So a couple of general comments. Some of you have probably noticed already that the headstones, with a few exceptions, are all facing east. There's a reason for that. It was believed in the history of American cemeteries that they were facing east to face the Judgment Day. When Judgment Day comes, they would rise up and face east to face their final judgment. That's why they're all facing that way, except there's a couple of exceptions. They're kind of interesting. The other little interesting tidbit about this cemetery is this represents the countrification, if that's a word, of cemeteries. You know, you think the old graveyards were usually next to churches. They were grim, dark places of death. And it eventually got to the point where people thought we should have a final, more peaceful, more not grim reaper experience with our relatives that have passed. So there was a movement that started to change all that, and this cemetery represents that. You can see the plots, the family plots that they have. And this is one of the few cemeteries left that still has the rims around the plots, because a lot of the cemeteries, to make it easier to maintain, to mow, they just took them out. We're one of the last ones left that still has the curbing and in some cases the fencing. And there's a whole history I'll touch briefly on what these fences mean. But we can go forward. Lee.
Yeah, let's go see one of the exceptions about who is not facing east.
The sculptures and different symbols on these headstones, but that would signify a little lamb, a little child, sadly died.
Welcome to the far corner of the Sunnyside. This was the last area to be populated with grave sites. And there's two very important grave sites I want to point out to you. The first is on your right, and if you can see it, there's a gold star right on the top of the monument. Okay, so that signifies that they died in service only. It's not a commendation medal or something. It's just that. But he is the only World War I. Oh, by the way, the name is George Morris, and he's the only World War I soldier from the island to be buried here. And I don't know anything about how the remains got here, but the monument definitely preserves his memory. One of the VFW posts is also named after him. That's another way that we remember him.
Is that Morris Road?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's where he farmed out there on Smith Prairie. Yeah, that's
Smith
right.
Prairie. Morris Road.
That's the Briar that went off to
Yeah.
World War I.
Okay.
Yeah, came back.
Yeah,
That's where he farmed with his father, actually his mother. He lost his father very early.
Okay. Great. All right. This name is also on the very nice monument in front of our courthouse in Coopville. There are 8 names on it. None of those 8 people were born on Whidbey Island. They were passing through as families or later becoming established. George, even though he's here, was not distinguished. But there was one other person on that 8-person monument who was, and his name was English, last name English, from Camp Casey. He was in the coastal artillery there. From there went to World War I and served under Patton, something related to artillery. It was tanks. You remember the early World War I tanks? Well, that's the way he died. So he was actually distinctly remembered, and I think even decorated by George Patton. He is English, Matthew's his first name. Matthew English is mentioned in George Patton's diary. So he's our best claim to fame, you might say, that we know of the World War I. Okay, over here, back of the gentleman, in front of the gentleman, American War. He got out after a year, and I don't know why he got out early, but he did.
Enlistments were very short.
I'm sorry.
Enlistments were very short. Only 6 months.
6 months? Really? Yeah, it's kind of an excursion, that war, in a way. It was, a lot of volunteers and like that. Anyway, so, the gentleman pointed out that getting out after a year, that's not unusual. So he served his time, apparently. The really puzzling thing was he went in and left as a private in the infantry. It's puzzling because he was a degree law person at that point, an attorney, and had some good experience even up in Greenfield, Massachusetts, before he came here. Anyway, I bring up Frank Pratt because...
Do you know about Caraco right here?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to point that
Yeah,
out.
Patrick's going to... Yeah, thank you.
Won't
Barry.
bother
Yeah.
us if you wander.
No,
Okay.
we're
Okay, we're good.
This is
Okay.
our-
Okay, so far so good?
No, I
Okay.
can't hear that.
Yeah, take
part.
another
He's
drink
not
if it's
here.
not,
No,
okay?
he just wanted you not to miss somebody, but
I know,
but,
yeah, Patrick's got it covered. Okay. So, Frank Pratt is important, and the reason is he brought New England sensibilities to our hick town, basically. Our hick town said, these old buildings rotting away here, they've been rotting away forever, you know? So he pointed out the historical significance of things, even erected 2 monuments himself, paid for them himself, big granite monuments, marking historical things that happened here. He preserved the buildings. He bought up the land, bought up the buildings, and preserved them. If not rebuild them in some case, like the block house over there. That's a rebuild job. Sorry to tell you. Anyway, through all of this, plus the way that he built his home, which is located right over there on the bluff, he used sensitivity in locating it relative to the landscape so that it wouldn't stick out. He used local building materials, and that sort of thing. All of these considerations go into the really the foundation of what we call Eby's Landing National Historic Reserve today. It's just slowly over time now that Frank Pratt is getting credit for this.
You know, Lee, you mentioned about a New England sensibility, and I think that if you were from New England back then, you already thought of history in terms of maybe a couple of centuries. If you're out in the West, the whole frontier is a lot more of a sense of transience.
Yeah.
And I just don't think people look at it in the same way.
That's right. And then one of the joys of my researching Frank Pratt was Greenfield, Massachusetts, right on the Mohawk Trail, the historic Mohawk Trail. You know, we've got trails around here too, but that's a big one. And it's a kind of a courier and ice type community with covered bridges, horse-drawn sleighs, Yankee workshops with old tools, and that's what his family did. That was the first source of Frank Pratt's wealth, was the tool making that his family did in Massachusetts. Okay, you're on, Patrick.
Okay, so look, I want to point out one kind of contemporary headstone here, and then we're going to cross over that way into the old Eby graveyard, talk a little bit about the Ebys, and then start hitting up the sea captains. But this is pretty interesting over here. These are the caracos. So I know Sue. Sue's still alive. She's a snowbird. She may be back now, but they're from Texas. Her husband Charles was a young Navy doc at the hospital that JFK came into after he was shot. He was the first doctor, ER doc, that saw JFK, and it haunted him his entire life. He became very famous. He became head of surgery at University of Washington, director of surgery, long career. But Sue would always say it just traumatized him because he knew when JFK came in, there was nothing. But Sue is like super nice. Okay, Dennis and Plot, and they were actually lighthouse keepers up at Smith Island, which is the lighthouse is long gone, but it's one of the oldest lighthouses in the territory. And Smith Island is off a little bit southwest of Fidalgo, out there. Yeah, very important lighthouse, but abandoned and fell into the ocean. So why are they here? Not sure. But he's here, and his two sons are here. They both served as lighthouse keepers, and then sadly both lost at sea in various accidents. And the last tour I gave here was one of the women said, "Well, where's Mrs. Dennis?" And didn't have an answer for it. I don't know. Sorry. But this is one of you can see the fencing here going around their plot. So one of the lighthouse keepers, we're going to point out some more as we go through.
Yeah, I was going to try to encourage as many as possible down here because this is a nice stone, nice monument. Got the Holy Bible opened up at the top. Tells that he was a native of Vermont, so he was New England. He had New England sensitivities. Okay, we are now looking at the gravesite of one of my favorite people, Robert Fay. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is his character. He was known as somebody who had a big heart for everyone, native or Chinese. Didn't matter. In fact, he became Indian agent for this area, reporting to somebody's great-great-great-grandfather over here. And reading the journals, he was really looking after the welfare of the natives as he did his work. He was known as good company, so he not only had good deeds, but he was nice to be with. Okay, what else did Robert Fay do? Well, he was here early. He was a whaler. He had spent considerable time at sea, a lot in the Arctic, by the way, putting away barrels and barrels of whale oil and shipping them back east. Well, he was slowing down on out there and came into Puget Sound, one of the earliest ship's captains to do it. He was working mostly between Olympia and what is today's Seattle. Captain Folger from Portland, who actually came from San Francisco, was coming up with a shipload of immigrants, and they needed to find their way to today's Seattle, Alki, or New York. And Robert Fay was selected by Captain Folger to be the master of the ship. He navigated in there. And once it got out of the ocean, it entered Puget Sound, and that's where he took over. So our guy here was responsible for the first ship to Seattle. Not only that, he worked with the new Chief Seaman. Okay, in this capacity, working down there and having bottled up an awful lot of fish stuff over time, he got into the business of pickling salmon, putting it in barrels, and shipping it down to San Francisco. Chief Seattle was in on that. He was a partner in that. They undoubtedly used a lot of native labor in that, which was very typical. Local natives and even some northern Indians typically figured into the labor pool quite a bit down here, more than we normally have appreciation. So anyway, great guy. You might read up on him. While we're here, as you can probably guess, we're in the heart of the old cemetery. Patrick, do you want to tell a little bit about these?
Yeah, I'll make a couple comments
Okay.
right now about that. So as I mentioned, they call this the Indian Cemetery. It's a graveyard, Eby graveyard that Mary Eby Bozarth carved out of for 1.5 acres the Ebys, especially the women, were women of deep faith. They had church services at various major homes. And Sarah back that has everybody listed, and then Winfield's up there. Winfield's best friend, his cousin George Beam up there. They're all up there. Called footstones. So the headstone, the footstone. That's the body is right there. And oftentimes the footstone would have the name and the dates, as opposed sometimes the headstone did not. So that was the headstone, footstone. Rise up and greet your final judgment.
Yeah, at this point I'd like to mention two things about service that the Eby family was involved with, other than farming, and all that kind of thing. During the Indian War, Colonel Eby formed a regiment called Company I, one of many around Puget Sound, and there were volunteers. Two of the folks right up here, Winfield and his cousin, George Beam. Oh, George Beam, yeah. George Beam right next to him, those two right there. They were in Company I. So we have three people right here related to the Eby family in Company I. Now, Company I, make a marker maybe to try to read about that if you're at all interested, because it's very interesting. It's like they were the United States Marines at the time. They had three different ships that supported them as they went up the Snohomish River to build Fort Eby. Okay? And the information on that is pretty good. It's very detailed, and you can get a blow-by-blow play, according to the official journals of that, what happened in the construction of Fort Eby, what the various people did. The Indian agent, Robert Fay was there. Pat Canham, a very prominent Native American, was there. You can just go on and on. So just make a mental note. If you ever see anything on Company I militia during the 1855-1856 Indian War, read it.
All right, where are we going next, Lee?
Okay.
Where are we going next?
Right here, I'll free you. We've got the Lovejoy Homes in Coopville.
I
Okay.
have the original, the office.
Oh, which
It's
one?
on my property
Uh-huh.
on Leach Street.
Oh,
The-
okay.
The Lovejoy office is an Airbnb now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
John Hunt? No, not John Hunt. Somebody, Park Service set it up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, we have somebody who's, got kind of a connection to the Lovejoy lumberyard and shipbuilding office, which is still there. That's the only thing surviving, as far as I know,
Yeah, I think
is
so.
that office.
Yeah.
Anyway, this family is like just major Coopville. They built houses of the highest caliber. They lived in those houses themselves or sold them. Most of them are still here today, not all, but most are. So they're known for that. They're also known for shipbuilding. So the Callista, the Whidbey, several other ships they built right here in Coopville. Okay, so this is the beginning. We have here Howard Bennett Lovejoy's stone, and with him is Callista. Now, Callista is another big name. If you ever see anything about Callista, be sure to read it. She did an amazing thing at the age of 17 when she got married to within the Lovejoy family to go up to Alaska, Sitka, in the dead of winter on her honeymoon and bring down a load of ice. Does that sound like fun?
Yeah.
Okay, so Callista is another one that you gotta kind of keep an eye out for. Wish we could go into more detail.
Who was her dad, or who were her parents? Who were Callista's parents?
Oh, well that's actually a relevant question, and I'll repeat it for the group. That's asking who were the parents of Callista, another ship's captain. And unfortunately he is not here, but his son is, way over there. And we actually won't visit that site, but I'll kind of point some things out to you because I know we're going to be running short on time. But anyway, Simeon Kinney was the father, okay, and then Thomas Kinney was the son. Both of them ship's captains, both of them deep sea, the real thing. And Simeon was particularly known for bringing important people here, which we'll see in just a second, one of them, to get established in the area. And he didn't die here because he got tapped to be master, what do you call it? Port master. What's the word I'm trying
Port of entry, customs house.
Yeah, for San Francisco. They said, come on back. You know, we need some help down here managing our port. And so he did, and he died down there. But his son is here. Okay.
Here's the monument to Dr. John Kellogg. Dr. Kellogg came out here, a medical doctor, came out here with his wife, intending to stop practicing medicine, become a farmer. Well, it didn't happen. So once the word was out that he was a medical doctor, he became kind of the canoe doctor. The natives would roam around various sites to attend to patients. He was extremely busy. So this is him right here. Very generous man. He purchased a section here from Mary to expand the cemetery. And there's a whole story about Dr. Kellogg related to Isaac Eby's murder. Won't get into that right now.
But he's an honorary ship captain.
Yeah, honorary ship
He
captain.
spent so much time in a canoe, and it actually saved his life because when Isaac Eby lost his head, the natives from the north were actually after this guy. But he was away doctoring in the canoe. It's more ship captains, and that's kind of what I'm specializing in today. Captain Coop, everybody's heard of Captain Coop. Well, this is the Coop plot, 20 by 20 foot plot, standard. But he's not in there. Captain Coop is right here.
For whatever.
And so it all has to do with when the populating of the cemetery happens and what's available and all of this stuff. It's a big story. But anyway, he's close, and his wife, and there's one son who is also a ship captain that I'd like to mention, and that's Stanley. Stanley was, of course, later on, and so they were into steamboats. So Captain Coop himself ended up his captainship with steamboats a lot. But he actually, of course, began in the day of sail. He was a deep sea captain. He took ships, spar material to France and England and China trade, and just, I mean, you name it. He was another guy who's the real thing. So, of course, Coopville was named after him. He was one of 2 donation land claims down there on the waterfront. And that's later became
So
Coopville.
a couple of comments. So yes, so you can see his headstone right here, missing to the crack. And years ago, the former director of the museum was rooting around in the underneath the museum building, and lo and behold, the top was down there. So I got out there, they put it back on. You can see what I mentioned earlier, the symbolism, gone home. Marie died much later, and in her will, it was $1,000. She wanted to create this plaque. The saddest little headstones for me in this entire place are these 2 little girls, Mary and Lizzie, and they're Ingle girls. They were the nieces of Bill Ingle, Bill and Flora Ingle. And back before these plots started happening, people were just sort of randomly buried different spots. The Ingles were way down there, the whole Ingle plot. But, they would have died very early, probably tuberculosis, TB. There they are, very sad. So, let's see, Lee, where are you? Over there.
Stones, and Captain Clapp was the last, he's known as the last sailing type sea captain in Coopville. He died in something like 1941, but he served a long time. He was a true sea captain in every sense of the word. It's interesting to talk about his wife too. Molly was the daughter of a prominent merchant entrepreneur in the community, Cranny. Grinnin and Cranny founded the store that is in the courthouse that's on Penn Cove at Santa Fuca. Okay, do you know where the courthouse is? Reddish brown?
Yeah, the 2-story red building.
Okay.
That was the courthouse.
And not only that, Cranny was a partner with Grinnin in a huge sawmill, world-class, big sawmill over at Itzlati on Camino Island, where they also built boats. They built 8 of them there. So that's kind of our tie-in, one of our tie-ins with Camino Island, having to do with mariner type work. Molly was a little bit on the sophisticated side, probably. Her father, of course, came from New England. By the way, all of the sea captains came from either Canada, the east coast of Canada, or the northeast of the United States. And there was one from Virginia, and Patrick will talk about Robertson. But other than that, they had this sensibility, this worldview. They had a different relationship to money and possessions and so on, and very represented by Cranny. Anyway, they were the dapper duo of Coopville, these 2. They were the talk of the town, including the newspapers, because they liked to dance. In one of the churches, the one that they belonged to, you could dance. But the other church, no way. Okay, so there was this controversy within the community and so on. But I think they won out. they got a great tribute in the paper. Molly made it a point every Sunday to go around, visit people and everything. So when they passed, they were greatly missed.
So what we're going to do right now is something we've done before. Some of you have heard about it. It's 3 o'clock our time. It's the National Moment of Remembrance. It was established by federal law quite some time ago, and what it mandates is wherever you are at 3 o'clock, you stop, picnic, wherever, us, and we just have a moment of silence because of the things that Lee talked about. The veterans that served our country honorably, died in combat. So we're just going to be silent for 10 minutes.
That's right. This is also a marker for kind of where we are in the tour relative to the time. So let me give you an idea of how much we could do that's left, or how much we could just put off. And Patrick and I will be happy to stay and answer questions, take you anywhere in the cemetery, whatever. How would you like to handle it? Do you want to try to continue a little bit longer along the same style as what we've done so far, or do you want to disband at this point?
You want to look for the hands, votes in favor of continuing?
Continuing.
All raise your hand.
Okay. And of course, if anybody has a problem with that, it's real easy to cut out. Okay, thank you. Okay, so to answer your question that just came up, which is a good one, how do you look up where somebody is, for example? All right, you can either do it online at the Sunnyside Cemetery website, which is very complete. It's had the benefit of a professional historian to put together a lot of the information there. You can also go to the Coopville Public Library, and there's a history section, local history section in it, that has several volumes on the cemetery, and it's very well indexed and so on. And if you have trouble reading the inscriptions, they've even got that online. It's possible to find it, and I can tell you how.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Right now is a good time to just kind of remind everybody of kind of the sweep of history that these sea captains are involved with, in addition to their simply just being part of the fabric of the community. The sweep is really kind of looking back the way they saw things, the sweep of civilization across the country, of comforts, of not hopefully having to endure a wilderness when you get here. And that was mostly said by the women. The men were still pretty gung-ho, and this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen, and the soil's fantastic and all of that.
Yeah, but then they left the women at home to fend for themselves.
Well, that happened too, but they had business. They were way on business. That's a kind of
Left
part
at home
of
with
it.
all the kids.
Anyway, so, Captain Swift is an example right here of somebody who's thoroughly a captain, a whaler, all around the world, about 5 or 7 times, I forget how many. All of that. Commerce to Europe. He knew how to get around. Anyway, he had 3 marriages. And the older he got, the younger his wife seemed to be, and the more demanding too. They wanted comforts. So he's delivering the furniture. That's some in the museum. This is the guy. So, you know, he was a squared away type. He could do it. He paid for his donation land claim in gold, which was very unusual. He had to buy it because he got established on the land a little later. By the way, several of the ship captains became farmers, but none of the farmers became ship captains. Okay? That's the way it worked, just to kind of get that straight. But anyway, very much a part of the sweep of history. From this spot, I'd like to also point out.
Before we leave there,
Oh, we're not leaving.
no, I mean this spot. So, Lee mentioned about Captain Swift. So, when I mentioned earlier the new maritime exhibit at the museum that's opening
June 6th.
June 6th, it has Captain Swift's cabin desk. Beautiful. It really looks like a kid's desk, but it's from it's one of his ship's desks. One thing I want to point out. These fences, especially these are spiked. These have symbolism. Symbolism is we're going to keep you in here so your spirit can't get out of here till Judgment Day. But we're also going to keep the evil spirits out. That's why there are these imposing spiked iron fences.
So what do you think? Should we put together a tour that just has to do with how this cemetery is put together, with symbolisms? We could do that.
Do you know if this is the namesake bracelet?
Yes, yes. Yeah, one of the things I didn't mention about Captain Swift, since he had 3 marriages, his family is pretty complicated. So if you look at the names, these are all associated with this. If you look at it's a big name here. Yeah, bracelet comes from. Okay, yeah, we can point out from here, monument. This is the Barrington one I'm referring to. It's the back to us. We can't see the name, but that large granite monument there is for the Barrington family. And Barrington is the main ship captain from the Oak Harbor area that we recognize today. Probably ahead of Morris. Morris was important too. But anyway, that was a multi-generational ship's captain's family. That's one thing you run into an awful lot. Most of these people we talked about, they have more than one generation of ship's captains. So that's what happened with the Barringtons. They started out all sail, a lot of intercoastal and inland waterway kind of sailing, including with the Russian-American company. You know, I mentioned taking ice down from Sitka. Well, that was in association with working with Russian-American to do that. And the Barrington found civilization here was that they had the goods, and so they set up stores. Without the ship captains, there just really wouldn't be stores around here like what we think of today. This gentleman right here was business partner of Captain Barrington, Edward Barrington. And he was very much his right hand man. He was kind of honorary ship's captains because, like Kellogg, he spent so much time in native canoes that we're just going to make him honorary. He had the mail contract early on, we're talking like early 1850s, between Olympia and Bellingham by canoe. That's what he did before he became